Hi everyone, welcome to ESC TV 2022 from Barcelona. It's great to be here with you today. My name is Leslie Cho. I am the section head for preventive cardiology and cardiac rehabilitation at Cleveland Clinic. And joining me today is Dr. Isla Mackenzie, the chief principal investigator for All Heart trial that was just released at ESC Late Breaking Trials. Congratulations. It's an excellent trial, well done. So maybe you can spend some time talking about the background and quickly the result, and then we can spend a lot of time talking about the implications.
Yes, so the All Heart trial took place over a number of years. It was designed back in about 2010, and there was some indication that allopurinol might improve various cardiovascular parameters at that time, so things like blood pressure, endothelial function, left ventricular hypertrophy. And we designed the All Heart study to look at hard cardiovascular outcomes in patients with ischemic heart disease. So we took nearly 6,000 patients, and they're randomized to receive allopurinol, 600 milligrams, or to continue their usual care. And then we followed them up long term for cardiovascular outcomes. So the primary outcome of the trial was a composite of non-fatal MI, non-fatal stroke, or cardiovascular death. And we also looked at all-cause mortality and various other cardiovascular outcomes. We also looked at quality of life and a health economic analysis.
And tell us what you found.
So we hoped we might find some benefit of allopurinol in patients with ischemic heart disease, but actually there was no difference in the primary outcome between the group randomized to allopurinol and the group on usual care. And there was also no difference in any of these clinical secondary outcomes between the groups, and no major difference in quality of life either.
I mean, I think the fascinating thing about the All Heart study is that it is an enormous study undertaken by really one region where you did a pragmatic trial design. I mean, 5,200 patients, how much did that cost?
Yeah, so this study was funded by NIH or HTA, and I think the total funding was something like £2.8 million.
I mean, that's astounding that you were able to do that trial, the size of that trial in a real world setting, and it was just a $2 million or £2 million study. I mean, that is astounding, and you should be really proud of what you accomplished. One of the surprising things about this study was that you enrolled from a primary care group. They were on excellent optimal medical therapy. Speak about that.
Yeah, so we recruited patients from 424 different primary care practices spread across Scotland and England. And these were patients just being managed in usual care in the usual NHS primary care system in the UK. And yes, we did find that they were really well managed actually, which is really nice to see.
Yeah.
So at baseline, for example, 90% of them were taking a statin, just under 90% were on antiplatelet agents, and then all the other drugs that you might expect patients with a previous MI or angina to be on. So, yeah.
I mean, excellent blood pressure control too. If you look at the blood pressure treatment, the one thing that was also surprising was that you had mandated that patients be greater than 60 years of age. Tell us about that. Tell us your thought process behind that.
Yes, so in the UK, there are no prescription charges for patients who are age 60 or over. So patients in England still pay a prescription charge if they're under the age of 60. So to make the trial practical and pragmatic, that was one reason we chose that age. We also chose that age to power the trial appropriately in that we didn't need to be able to detect the endpoints in the population we chose. So those were the two main reasons why we went for that age group.
Now looking back, we all know the result, but if you could redo the trial and money was not a factor, do you think that enrolling a patient younger into a disease state would have shown benefit, or how would you have designed it, again, if money was no factor?
Yeah, so obviously we could have measured more things at baseline. We could have conducted in-person study visits perhaps more of them. Now, that's an interesting question because some patients prefer to have a remote trial design where they don't have to come in and have proper in-person study visits. So we deliberately designed this to be inexpensive, pragmatic, good for patients, so they didn't have to spend a lot of time traveling and attending visits. And I think we effectively did that. I think that's really the way forward for trials in the future, is to do as much of it in a decentralized way as we can, but always taking into account what's good for the patient.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think you do have to make it easy for patients to enroll, but also we can't be relying on like big pharma trials when the questions we want to answer has nothing to do with the new compound. So I do think that your group, the pragmatic study design, the probe design, and the time trial is really innovative and really is the future of clinical trials. But if you can think about, like just the whole concept of allopurinol and oxidative stress, maybe getting them earlier in the process would have...
So you're right. So the median duration of ischemic heart disease when patients entered the trial was just over 10 years. We didn't exclude people who had much more recent onset of ischemic heart disease, but that was the median duration. So it was mainly a study of people who had long-term ischemic heart disease.
Now, if you, where do we go? Is allopurinol dead? Like, are we no longer going to even talk about allopurinol?
Yeah,
is there a hope?
So obviously allopurinol remains a very useful drug in its context in the terms of the management of patients with gout.
Yes.
A lot of patients with ischemic heart disease have gout. It's a common comorbidity, and although this trial didn't look at that question in that population, if a patient has gout and need treatment for that, there's no safety issue with giving patients with ischemic heart disease in this trial long-term allopurinol if they're able to tolerate it initially. So in some ways that's perhaps reassuring.
Do you think, I mean, there was a study, Exact Heart Failure or Exact HF, which was allopurinol in high-risk heart failure patients with elevated urate levels, and they didn't show any benefit. It's kind of interesting, the sort of concept, because when we are looking at drugs like allopurinol, we sometimes think about the concept behind these drugs. And I agree with you that allopurinol, like all of us being afraid to use allopurinol, in this way we can use it on elderly patients and it's quite safe. But perhaps the concept of the xanthine oxidase inhibition, maybe that is a little bit, now fallen sort of out of favor with your excellent study.
Yeah, so I mean, from our perspective, this question about whether we should be giving allopurinol to people, with other conditions other than what it was indicated for and licensed for, has been around for years. I mean, allopurinol has been around since the 1960s at least. And there are individuals who have believed that it might be useful in this kind of context. And I think what this all-heart study has done is definitively show that there was no benefit on cardiovascular outcomes giving it to this group of patients with ischemic heart disease. I think that's really useful data to have out there to help general practitioners and patients to reach decisions on this.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I also think it's a great sort of testament to the NHS health system that patients are really on optimal medical therapy, doing well. I mean, I think that speaks really well for NHS, and you guys should be really proud of doing these kind of pragmatic trial design. But before we sort of open it up to the audience, I want to talk about something totally different from the all-heart study. And that is it's so nice to see a female principal investigator doing clinical trials of this size, doing late-breaking trials. So I hope it's okay with you, but just tell us your journey about how you became a clinical trialist and how, all the sort of the hard work that goes into being a mom and also being a trialist.
Yeah, so I've worked in clinical trials in one way or another probably for more than 20 years now. And that intensified probably 13 years ago when I moved into Dundee in Scotland. Running any clinical trial, anyone will tell you that it's a lot of dedication, hard work, commitment over a number of years. And I do have 3 young children, and it has been a challenge to manage a large clinical trial like this from beginning to end while taking periods of maternity leave. Let's just say I didn't ever turn my computer off when I was on maternity leave, and I think I was probably doing my emails in the hospital. But I'm not saying that everyone should do that, but in order to keep your trial happy, it's like having a 4th child, actually. You have to nurture your trial all the way through, whatever else is going on in your life. And you have to take the opportunity to have children, and it's so important to have a rounded life. But I get a lot of satisfaction from both my family and my work, and I've got very supportive colleagues around me. And yes, it's important to have intellectual stimulation and to give that role model to your children and to future generations coming. And several people have come up to me and said, it's so nice to see a female presenter in the late-breaking trials.
We did a study looking at all the top-tier journal, Lancet, JAMA, and New England Journal, looking at cardiovascular trials, and only 10% of the trialists were female. If you discounted the industry, it was only 10%. So it is really, really a pleasure and really wonderful to see you on stage. It was really wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, for any females out there wanting to do the same, it is definitely possible. It's a lot of hard work, as it is for a man or anyone to do a clinical trial. But it's definitely worth it for the satisfaction of seeing something through and being able to coordinate such a large endeavour. And it's very satisfying to get a definitive result at the end that can inform practice.
Yes. Okay, we're going to open it up to the audience for any kind of questions. And while we're having our audience member go to the microphone, there you are. Yes, please.
Hello. This is a little bit cheeky. I'm the co-author of the study with Isla. But Isla and I did another study called the FAST trial, where we compared allopurinol and febuxostat. And what this trial shows is that we maybe ought to pay more attention to that trial because it was a direct head-to-head. The formal analysis of FAST was that febuxostat was non-inferior, but there was an important reduction in all-cause mortality with febuxostat versus allopurinol. So my question to Isla is, should we repeat this study with febuxostat?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. And certainly, if we were starting the study now, we might have chosen febuxostat. And I guess the question is whether we would see any benefit. And obviously the data on febuxostat, the CARES trial from the US, gave a different result, but they had much worse follow-up and drop-off from therapy than the FAST trial in Europe had. But it was a similar trial with some similarities, but some important differences.
Just educate me, febuxostat doesn't lower urate levels, right?
No, febuxostat is another xanthine oxidase inhibitor that's actually more potent than allopurinol.
Okay.
It doesn't have as much of a problem as causing rash as allopurinol can initially with some patients. So in that sense, it's a very good alternative therapy to be available.
Okay. So that's interesting. So if you were to design a trial now, you would, how would you do it? Would you do it in a younger population? Would you do it in people with less duration of disease? Would you do it in heart failure, diabetics?
Yeah, so I think the results of this trial are overwhelmingly neutral, and I'm not sure that I would run the trial again in any of these groups that you've mentioned. We did have subgroup analyses that looked at some of these groups that you've just mentioned. The question of whether we might have had a more positive result in people with more acute disease is interesting. There's 1 or 2 small trials that have suggested potential benefit in acute situations like acute coronary syndrome on cardiovascular outcomes over the next couple of years. I think we'd need larger trials to substantiate that there is a benefit there.
I mean, there is that potential benefit of myocardial ischemia and injury and reperfusion, and there's that whole notion of stopping the redox signaling once you had ischemia. So perhaps that might be a population. I mean, I think the great challenge is how do you find the right patient, but also how do you select the right timing of these drugs?
I mean, I think the beauty of all heart is that it is a fairly generalizable, normal care population, that we didn't exclude a lot of people. We tried to keep our exclusion criteria as few as possible just to create safety and to make sure the trial would show what we were looking for in terms of an outcome.
I think any trial in 2022, you're going to have to hit it out of the park because you're on such great optimal therapy. So unless you can show something amazing, it's going to be really tiny.
I think you're right that in the management of ischemic heart disease, we're really seeing very small incremental benefits with new treatments that come along. So I don't think allopurinol is going to be that treatment that way.
But I mean, honestly, this has been a fantastic effort on your part. It's been your fourth child since 2010, right? What's next for you?
So we have lots of ideas. My own interest is getting into doing trials in a more decentralized way so that we can make it easier for patients and more cost effective to do, and that we can answer important questions more quickly and more simply. So my vision is to build that into any key trials that we want to do, is to integrate these decentralized elements going forwards. And we have lots of ideas and lots of things we could do in the near future.
Well, that's wonderful. And again, congratulations on really your amazing efforts, and your investigators too, who are sitting on the front row here.
Yeah, I'd like to thank all the patients and collaborators. This trial is not one person's effort. This is a huge team effort with hundreds of individuals involved, and of course the thousands of patients. So thank you very much.
Thank you.